Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us this evening. This is John McDougall. I am the event coordinator here at Murder by the Book in Houston, and I'm super excited for tonight's event. But before we get into it, I just wanted to make some general store announcement stuff. First up, we are open for browsing. If you haven't come to visit us in a while, we reopened back in October. We're encouraging masks when you come in the store, but we're not limiting the number of people in the store anymore. So we hope that you will come see us, although we do know that not everybody is getting out just yet. So if you still prefer curbside pickup, you can always give us a call when you are heading our way, and we're happy to run stuff out to the car for you. Also wanted to mention before we get into tonight's event that we have signed book plates from all three authors. So if you order a copy of Hex on the Beach from us, you will get a book plate signed by all three of them. They also sent some bookmarks and swags that we will tuck in there with it as well. And while we're chatting this evening, if you have questions for any of them, you can post those in the comments on Facebook or in the live chat on YouTube, and I will be able to see them, and I will pop those in as we are chatting with them. Also wanted to mention that a lot of people have been asking us when we're going to be able to start hosting in-store events again. And we finally have an answer. We're super excited. We'll be able to have people, authors in-store again starting in September. We're going to kick it off September 5th with Miranda James, who many of you might know as Dean James, who was the former store manager for many years. He's going to sign with us on September 5th. So far, everything that we've set up has been pretty much mostly with authors directly. Publishers are still trying to figure out kind of if they're sending people out on the road, what's going on with that. So I don't know how much more stuff we will actually get on the books this year, but we're excited that we do have at the moment, I think 4 or 5 in-store events scheduled. So definitely check out murderbooks.com for that. As I said, I'm so excited about tonight's event for lots of reasons. One of the things that's really awesome about working at Murder by the Book and being a bookseller is getting to meet and getting to know authors just through the course of the years. But what's really special for me tonight personally is I read all 3 of these authors before I started working at Murder by the Book. So be able to know them as a reader first and then as a bookseller and as a friend has been a treat for me. As many of you guys know, Murder by the Book was the bookseller for New Orleans StoryCon a couple of years ago, and getting invited to be the bookseller for that is still just like one of the career highlights in my bookselling world. So I'm so excited for tonight's event. So I'm going to get our authors brought out. I am going to do alphabetical order. So we're going to start with Kelley Armstrong. How are you tonight, Kelley? You are muted. There we go.
I'm so used to muting myself at all times. Yes, yeah. I'm good. Thank you.
So Kelley Armstrong believes experience is the best teacher, though she's been told this shouldn't apply to writing her murder scenes. To craft her books, she has studied Aikido, archery, and fencing. She sucks at all of them. She has also crawled through very shallow cave systems and climbed half a mountain before chickening out. She is, however, an expert coffee drinker and a true connoisseur of chocolate chip cookies. Next, I'm going to bring out Jeaniene Frost. How are you tonight, Jeaniene?
Hi, I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm good. It's good to see you.
You too. Yeah, it's been years.
Yeah. So Jeaniene Frost is the New York Times and USA Today bestselling author of the paranormal romance and urban fantasy. Her works include the Night Huntress series, the Night Prince series, the Broken Destiny series, and the Night Rebel series. Jeaniene's novels have also appeared on Publishers Weekly, Wall Street Journal, and ABA IndieBound and the international bestseller list. Foreign rights for her novels have sold to 20 different countries. She lives in Florida with her husband, Matthew, who long ago accepted that she rarely cooks and always sleeps in on the weekends. In addition to being a writer, Jeaniene also enjoys reading, writing, poetry, watching movies, exploring old cemeteries, spelunking, and traveling by car. Airplanes and cookbooks frighten her. Children frighten me too, so. Next up, we have Melissa Marr. How are you tonight, Melissa?
I'm thrilled to be here.
I'm so excited. So Melissa Marr is a former university literature instructor who writes fiction for adults, teens, and children. Her books have been translated into 28 languages and have been bestsellers internationally as well as domestically. She is best known for the Wicked Lovely series for teens, Graveminder for adults, and Bunny Roo, I Love You. In her free time, she practices medieval sword fighting, kayaks, hikes, and raises kids and chickens in the Arizona desert. So I'm sure I don't have to tell anybody who was tuned in for this. Between the 3 of these authors, the 3 of you guys have written a bajillion books. It's crazy just how prolific the 3 of you are. So tonight we are here to talk about Hex on the Beach, which is their new anthology that has just come out. As I mentioned, we have signed bookplates to go with all of our copies. I've dropped a link both in the live chat on YouTube and also on Facebook if you guys want to order copies of those. And we are also, they are going to be giving away a $50 Murder by the Book gift certificate and 2 copies of Hex on the Beach that will come with the signed bookplates. So the giveaway is open to people who are in the US and Canada. So if you guys are watching and you want to be entered, just kind of let us know where you're from. Just say, like Ivana has just said, hi from Cleveland. So just let us know where you're from. And as I said, if you guys have questions for them out there, please pop those questions in the chat and I will get into those as we're chatting. But to get us started, as I said, we're going to be chatting about Hex on the Beach. So how did you guys come up with the idea for the anthology?
I'll let you take that, Melissa.
Well, I mean, we have, since the very beginning of my career, and actually it's the same year Jeaniene came out, we have been plotting projects together. You mentioned StoryCon, but we also, Kelley and I co-authored a middle grade series, the Blackwell Pages, and Kelley and I have organized a group tour, which I think is where we first met you, John.
Yeah.
So we ended up doing these things. We did what we called the mini tour, which is probably best not mentioned because I took these 2 wonderful ladies in my micro Mini Cooper, which sounded like a good idea until we did it. We had fun. Yeah, we did have fun. But then there was a pandemic, right? So I couldn't plot seeing them. I mean, Kelley and I had plans to be away in the Yukon, and I'm not going to see them at conferences. So I suggested we write an anthology together. Because it makes, I don't know, it makes me sad to think of a year without something with them.
Yeah. So what is the theme for the anthology and how did you guys come up with the theme? Did you have that before you started the stories? Or did you just realize that the stories had a theme as you started working on them?
Kelley?
You want me to do that? Okay, so yeah, it wasn't really so much a theme as saying we want them to all be summer based. Mm-hmm. So we knew that we wanted to take stories in our existing universes and have sort of a fun summer novella in each, and that's how we came up with the title.
Awesome. So, so you mentioned that they're all kind of set in kind of existing worlds. So, can you guys tell us each a little bit about your novella specifically, and kind of what series it's in, and maybe a little bit about that series for anybody who might not know? Let's start with Kelley.
Okay, so speaking of the pandemic, which I'm sure nobody actually wants to talk about, but it is relevant. When the pandemic started, I had a hard time writing. I was writing a dark thriller, and I did not want to write anything dark. So I decided I would do an e-serial, and it would be light, fun, paranormal, light urban fantasy, and it was about people who could cast curses and luck workers, and there's some Greek gods and everything else going on in there. It was just light, fun mystery caper stories. So my novella is set in that universe, and it is narrated by a secondary character who is better known as Venus, or Aphrodite, the goddess of love. She comes to a small town festival where the main character lives and decides to practice her matchmaking skills while setting them on a cold case mystery that turns out to be a real mystery.
All right. How about you, Jeaniene?
I had started feeling a little nostalgic for my my first series, the Night Huntress series with Cat and Bones, back at the end of 2019. I had actually written part of a free serial retelling their story from Bones' point of view and posted it on my website. And then I was working on Ian's book when, again, the P word, the pandemic hit. And, once I finished that, I really wanted, again, I just didn't have the emotional creativity to start an entire new set of characters or anything. I mean, I kind of went deer in the headlights creatively, I think, for the first part of it. But I did really still miss, I missed Cat and Bones. I had missed them for a while. So, and I had been thinking of a story with Kat and Denise, because, you know, a girls theme. I've had a lot of people say, oh, we love the heroines. We don't, you know, we'd love to see what they would do, like if they just hung out together. And so when Melissa talked about the anthology idea, I said, well, I've got a girls' night out story with Kat and Denise, and, you know, of course, still set with the other characters as well. And it was, again, for me, it's lighter and funnier, but, you know, still, I mean, what can I tell you? Several people lose their heads, but, you know, that's just standard with my books. But I at least think it's humorous when it happens. They really deserve it. But it was a way to revisit those characters and show, you know, I get asked all the time, what are Cat and Bones and Katie and Denise and the rest of the gang doing now? Like, what's going on with them? And this gives a snapshot into that while getting to show, you know, the girls having a good time and raising a little bit of hell. So it was a lot of fun.
And how about you, Melissa?
Feels weird to start this way, but so I was bitten by a rattlesnake, and I didn't like it. And so I ended up calling my dear friend Jeaniene, and I said, you know, I've been reading these books with these amazing fanged creatures, and I love them, and it's so sexy, and the bite is so sexy. And then, you know, so there's this creature with these extendable fangs that sunk into my arm, and, you know, it's not sexy. So I started my series because I was having a really hard time with the repercussions of that snake bite. Like, I would wake up at night convinced there were snakes in the house. I'm lucky I survived it. But so I started the series, and instead of having sexy vampires, my fanged things are unappealing. They're the bad guys. And then, of course, because I can't get away from fairies, so the series is Fairy Bargains. It's fanged creatures and fairies and magic. And I kept thinking, when we're talking about summer fun and going away, for me, the story came down to my very first time going to a spa. And Jeaniene, of course, says spas are super fun. I conned Kelley at one point to go for a facial with me because I was afraid. And so I thought, well, what if the spa isn't just like intimidating? What if it's genuinely a problem? So it's kind of hippies gone bad, I guess, with witches and monsters and fanged enemies. So, you know, a spa day gone wrong.
Awesome.
Really wrong.
So one of the things that's kind of tricky about novellas, I think, is, especially because, as you guys mentioned, they're all kind of part of an existing series. You know, you have a limited amount of time to potentially introduce a new reader to your world that you've already created in other books. And at the same time, you also have to make sure that, like, you're giving something to kind of current fans that's maybe like that will keep them interested. But then you also have to make sure that it potentially doesn't, like, spoil or change the direction of the main series in case people don't miss it. So how do you balance kind of all of that while you're working on something and you have kind of such that short constraint of a novella? Let's go the other way around and start with Melissa.
Well, I suck at balance. So I basically approach each novella as if it's a novel, and I sort of expect them to be read together. So what I ended up doing because I've done this in the Wicked Lovely World, and I did it with Gravebinder, and I'm doing it here, is that, well, like the next book, I'll either give the novella away for free or I'll bundle it as part of the novel so people don't miss it. So I move the series plot along as I'm doing the novella. And I try to think about, I mean, honestly, my first book in this series, The Wicked and Dead, got reviews that I feel like I missed a book because I'm starting right in the middle of something. And that's always going to be the case with my books. I always start partway into it. I'm not interested in the beginnings or why this person. So I approach novellas much like I approach my novels. You're always going to feel like maybe you missed something, but keep going. The answers are in there.
How about you, Jeaniene?
Yeah, I'm not that smart. You're like, yeah, you don't want to write anything that'll screw it up for the main series. And I'm thinking, oh, shit, that's a good point. Oops. I just write whatever story is in my head. and hopefully it doesn't screw anything up too bad with the main series. And if it has, my apologies. Because I've joked before that, I'm not driving this bus. The characters take the wheel. That's part of actually being that's a more honest way of saying I'm an organic writer. I don't plot as much as I just let the story come to me. I have some ideas when before I write, but a lot of the meat and bones of the story comes to me as I write. So I'm not thinking that, I can't do this or that because it'll screw up the main plot. I'm, kind of just writing the parts that I know and being surprised by the parts that come to me as I'm sitting at the keyboard. And I mean, that's really, I know a lot of people write organically, so I guess I'm not the only one winging it that way, but it's worked out so far. I haven't gotten too much hate mail, so I'm just going to cross my fingers and keep going with that.
And how about you, Kelley?
So I write a lot of novellas, and there are two types for me. There are the ones that are meant to be standalone within the series. They are not part of an anthology, so they are specifically aimed at the current readership of that series. And in those ones, certainly things can happen that affect the series, and if readers don't read the novellas and wonder what they've missed, I can point them back at the novellas. Although a lot of them happen after the series finishes, so they are more like tying up loose ends. This type was different because this is one that's meant for an anthology, knowing that probably 2/3 of the readers aren't going to have read the series that is part of. So it really was taking a completely separate mystery, a different narrator, and therefore the story stands alone by itself. If you are reading the series, you get some advancement in particularly secondary characters. You get to know more about them. But if you're not reading the series, you should be able to just jump into it.
So we've seen in the last couple of years that, it's a really good time to be kind of an urban fantasy fan. We're starting to see more urban fantasy getting published again. In the YA world, we're starting to see vampires are popping up again. So it seems like kind of that cycle is kind of starting to come back around. Why do you think that we're starting to see that kind of pop back up in pop culture again? Let's start with Kelley.
I think that all the subgenres are cyclical in a way. I mean, what we have, in my opinion, honestly, what we have is something happens that gets people reading a subgenre. I mean, when I started urban fantasy, people didn't know what to call it. We certainly had Laurel K. Hamilton doing great things in it with her series, and Jim Butcher and Charlene Harris, and then I started, and they still didn't even have a name for it. And then it took off, and then it got really big, and then people got tired of it, and it went down again. So I think we're now seeing it coming back up again. People who hadn't read it are starting to read it, getting a lot more people now reading Bitten, coming into it, and then going out and looking for more of that. So I think we're just going to keep seeing it. Yes, it is coming back in, it'll grow, it'll go back down again.
How about you, Jeaniene? Anything to add?
I think people are always gonna gravitate toward paranormal and fantasy, urban or rural or whatnot otherwise, because ever since, our ancestors were sitting around a cave fire saying, what if, as far as the things that might go bump in the night or the sounds they heard, people have liked stories that take elements of the fantastic, of that go beyond our normal reality. And yes, it's cyclical. You'll have the big boom and then the bust, and it'll go back around because, trends and changes and all that. But I always think we'll have these stories because they allow the imagination to wander in a way that, other stories have limits on when you set them in the real world. So even though they might be hot, lukewarm, or not, they will come back around eventually, because it's just fun to imagine what if, and then fill in the blank with whatever creature or whatever trope that you enjoy most.
Yeah. How about you, Melissa?
So I have two theories. The first of which is coming from teaching literature. I mean, I think like Jeaniene saying, it's been around for a while. I mean, we had our Beowulfs, we had our Shakespeares. I mean, there's something in it that resonates in terms of story. I think speculative fiction always gives us a chance to talk about things that are harder to talk about in real fiction. So I think in some way, you know, as Jeaniene and Kelley are both leaning into, that it is, and it is perpetual. But I think the other thing that, you know, has to be on the front is I think sometimes we just get new blood with editors and agents who are willing to look at it, because urban fantasy, paranormal romance didn't actually go away. It went indie. A lot of those authors that, you know, that we knew when we were starting out doing this, a lot of those authors never stopped writing. They just started doing it themselves because advances changed, publisher support changed. And I think ultimately what happens is you get a new agent, a new editor who's like, oh, wait a second, I don't have the fatigue that these other agents and editors have had from having 500 submissions that are very similar. And so you get a big one and then things boom. So that's my theory.
It was, you know, so you guys mentioned, you know, having a hard time kind of writing as kind of early days in the pandemic. I was having a really hard time reading too, just as like we would be slammed at the store with online orders and we were only there for a couple of hours a day. And that was around the time that I think that the advanced readers of the new Kim Harrison had popped up, that she hadn't written in the Hollows for a while. So I realized I had missed like a couple in the series. So I think I got caught up on those. I read the two books that Kelley put out from the twins' perspective in the Otherworld series. You know, Melissa, you had just had the new Wicked Lovely book come out. So it was just like this perfect time, like March of like 2020, where it was just like perfect for me to kind of rediscover my love for the genre and just like throw myself back into these comfort books. So it's been great to see kind of that pop up. So Ivana just asked a great question in the comments. She wants to know, who is an author that you would fangirl over meeting? Let's start with Kelley.
And now this gets really tough because I have met authors that I have fangirled over. So, or probably in my case, my fangirling is very internal. So they probably did hopefully not see fangirling, and it was just all in here. So someone that I haven't met that I would fangirl over is honestly really tough because I've been lucky enough to meet a lot of the authors that I really enjoy reading. So I don't know. Pass.
How about you, Jeaniene?
Like Kelley, I've been fortunate. I've gotten to meet a lot of the authors. Kelley was one author, actually, that, and I've never told her this, but I was so nervous the first time I met you. I don't know if I spoke, you know, so yeah, it wasn't rudeness. It was just, I didn't want to just blurt out like, you know, that sort of thing. Because I have. I remember I was getting off a panel at a convention and Diana Gabaldon was getting on the panel and I saw her and it just came out of me. I'm like, oh my God, I love your book so much. And it was just this vomit of, you know, squeeing. And then I'm like, okay, bye. And I mentioned it on the next panel I was on. I'm like, I so embarrassed myself. And later a reader came up to me and said, yeah, Diana actually said something on the panel that some author just gushed at her and ran. And it was like, oh, that would have been me. And Charlene Harris, the first time I met her, I'm hoping I spoke coherent sentences, but I have no idea. So yeah, I probably wouldn't want to meet any other authors that I would really admire, because yeah, I'll just embarrass myself again, and you know, I've already done that pretty thoroughly a few times.
How about you, Melissa? Any fangirl moments?
Well, so my editor called me my first year of writing and said, there's this Canadian author who wrote this Bitten, but she's writing a YA. Would you be interested in reading it? And that frequency Jeaniene just hit, I surpassed it. It was full of shriek. And then we're at a conference and I've got to meet her for breakfast. And the night before, Jeaniene, because I'm not a morning person, the night before, Jeaniene the whole night is like, don't have a drink. You've got to get up early. And I walk in there and I think I seemed calm. Kelley, please lie and say I did, because I spent the whole time going, I have not had any sleep. The coffee is not kicking in. I can't just say I love you very much. So that was fun. And Charlene was the other big one for me. Her Lily Bard books actually eventually led to Sookie, which led to Kelley, which led to Butcher, which led to Hamilton, which led to Harrison. Like she was my gateway drug. But more specifically, Lily Bard was the first time I had read just a book I picked up at the library that she's a rape survivor. And I hadn't seen someone dealing with that well in a book. And so I met her and I just started crying. And I was like, it like completely changed my life. She's like, yeah, Sookie. And I was like, no, I mean, Sookie's fine, but let's talk about Lily. And that was it. That was it for me, was Charlene and Kelley. So yeah, I don't think there's many living people that we haven't had the pleasure of meeting. It's a really small world. If you could bring Faulkner back, I'd love to like both hug him and tell him he needs some therapy. But you know, in terms of living people, I think we got it going.
Yeah. So so when I got to meet Kelley and Melissa, they were doing a drop-by signing for the Smart Chicks tour, and they dropped by Murder by the Book. And I literally brought like literally every Kelley Armstrong book I had. I had like all the Otherworld books. I had the books that had all of the novellas. I had this I literally had to bring them to the bookstore with me in a box to have her sign all of them for me. And that's how I also got to meet Melissa. And we were talking, and we were talking about what our favorite Kelley books were, and we were both talking about oh my gosh, I'm completely blanking on the name of it now. Is it Haunted? Is that the Eve book? I'm Googling it.
Yeah, it's Haunted.
Yeah. And so we talked about how that was one of our favorites. And so then like Melissa and I like immediately like connected. So that was one of my like really early Murder by the Book fangirl moments.
You had a dolly, if I recall correctly. I brought them over on a dolly.
I did.
That is a devoted bookseller right there.
So you guys have all something weird just popped up on my screen. Okay, there we go. So you've all recently, either with this anthology or things that you've done recently, have all kind of dipped back into worlds that you had created a while ago. As I mentioned, Kelley, you did it with the Otherworld story with the twins. Melissa, you've got Wicked Lovely stuff coming out. And Jeaniene, you dipped back in with this novella. So what was it like getting to go back and kind of play in those worlds that you maybe hadn't revisited in a while? Let's start with Kelley.
Yeah, I had always said, I get asked, will you ever go back to the Otherworld? And I typically say no. However, they would also say, would you ever go back and write the twins? And that's where they'd get me. And I'd go, okay, that's the one thing that I might do. When they became teens, I could go back and write that. And I think going back to it was fun and also scary. And what I tried to do with that book was, for anyone who does read it, they will see that the actual adult characters aren't there for very long. And it's because, it's been so long since I wrote that series. Could I capture them the same way? Am I going to remember 13 books plus umpteen short stories, novellas? I'm going to contradict myself. So I kind of got those twins away and off on their own, interacting with new characters, which was great. But I also got to tie in characters from my darkest powers, which was my YA before. So bringing those characters who had never been in this series into that. So I really had a lot of fun going back to it.
How about you, Jeaniene?
It was I went back to it not intentionally or thinking that I'd write a story. Like I said, in late 2019, I was rereading Something in Halfway to the Grave, probably to check out a research thing, because writing one of the other interconnected series, and you forget little details. So I was going back and rereading, and I was reading the first book, and then I just kind of kept reading a little bit, and I was like, well, this doesn't suck. Which might sound odd, but after you read something and then then you see all the errors you were blind to before, and you just want to go through with a red pen. But anyway, And for fun, I thought, I wonder what Bones was thinking during this chapter. So I rewrote the first chapter from his point of view, and I had fun doing that. So then I wrote the second chapter, and before I knew it, I had written several chapters from his point of view, and I thought, I'll post them on my website. Me and 10 other people will care. And there was like a really surprising reaction from readers. I mean, I got like just a bunch of people like, please post more, and I was kind of surprised because it's been forever since I wrote Cat and Bones. And so I did start writing more, and then I had to stop because I had to finish, that whole contracted book thing they really want you to turn in. So I just, it felt good. It felt like hanging out with old friends, and I really, I wanted to do more of it. So I got to, and I was actually, I really enjoyed it. I'm probably going to finish the Bones point of view story because I just had, like I said, it just really felt like going back to a familiar place with people I hadn't seen in a while that turns out I really missed.
How about you, Melissa? Because you not only did you dip into the Wicked Lovely world again, you also, gave us the Graveminder sequel that people had been waiting for too.
So the weird thing about being a writer is before this was my job, it was a thing I did for my own pleasure solely. And at the end of each year, I would just throw out what I wrote that year. That was sort of my tradition. Every New Year's, I would just burn whatever I wrote that year. And it felt good, right? So, but yes, it does. So over the last decade or so, since I finished the Wicked Lovely books, I would start writing Wicked Lovely stories for myself. And over the last decade, I wrote half of Cold Iron Heart, which is Uriel's story back in the Victorian era. I wrote a couple novellas, but I was writing them for myself. And like Jeaniene, like it was just a thing I did. And I mentioned it in passing. I don't know what it was, like Twitter or my Patreon or just somewhere I mentioned it. And people were like, why are we not getting this? Well, this is just stuff I do for me. Like it wasn't meant like the book is over, the series has ended. So so it wasn't ever really going back. I never really left. It was just a thing I do like when I didn't have a deadline and, I just wrote for fun. So then the pandemic came and I was like, well, people want something and I have these things. So I revised and edited and did all that. And there they are. So, yeah. And it's perfectly fine to burn things, by the way, Jeaniene. I saw that look.
I love when Melissa says things like that. Like, oh, I just write this stuff and at the end of the year, I just burn it. Like, everybody does this. And then like, you just see the looks of horror on everyone else's face with like, nope, that's not quite what I do.
Yeah, sometimes you're right just to get the words out. It's for you, right?
But you don't burn it. You just put it on an old file on your computer and you just let it collect cyber dust. You don't burn it.
You sound like Kelley did the day we were on a retreat in San Diego and I discovered I had so many unanswered email. I just did select all and deleted my entire email history from the last decade. Yeah, see, that was what Kelley looked like. It felt really good.
you can't.
I don't even know what to say.
I mean, you can't see this, but my husband is like laughing from his computer and also has the same horrified look on his face. So
you guys should try it. Just select and delete everything.
I get the temptation. I totally understand the temptation. There are days where that would be really great to have that fresh start.
But then you can't look at the inbox and mentally beat yourself for not getting all the emails. And then where is the sadomasochism in that?
That's also true.
Clean slate, baby. Clean slate. Just wipe it all out.
So, Jeaniene, I have one question specifically for you. So, Melissa and Kelley have both played in the middle grade world. They played in the young adult world. Have you been tempted to play in those worlds at all?
I wrote a new adult. That's probably I started a YA many years ago, and wrote a few chapters of it and sent it to my agent, and she sent it to a couple editors, and the feedback that I got was all summarized. Yeah, we can tell you are not young. Like please stop. And you know what? Hey, listen, it's true. I'm not okay, and I don't have kids to get caught up on all the whatever. It's just not. Yeah, that's not for me. But I did write new adult when that was a thing. And it's basically just like college coming of age stuff. And so it's still characters who are in I can't remember what age range I said it was, 18 to 25 maybe. And my character was 20, and she, so it fit that. And that was about as young as I think I can go. And even still, I remember sending some sample chapters to another friend of mine, and she had her daughter read it, who was around that age. And her daughter was like, dude, she's got an RV. Like, how old is she? And then she's like, why can't it be like a band tour bus that they refurbish to go on this road trip? And I'm like, well, that is cool. And that is what's in the book. Because again, not young person was like, it would really be nice to go in a nice RV. I'm too damn old.
So for Melissa and Kelley to turn it over to you guys similarly. So what made you guys want to try to write? Because I guess was the Blackwell Pages, was that the first middle grade that you guys both did? So what was the impetus for wanting to write for younger readers? Let's start with Kelley.
Melissa and I had both talked about it because we had our YA series and they were done for our daughters. I mean, the story goes that my daughter got to be about 11, 12, 13 and started eyeing Bitten on my shelf saying, can I read that? And I'm like, no, you cannot read that, for years. So I said, let me write you something set in that universe, but meant for teens. So then, of course, I've got boys who are younger, and when they started hitting that age, they're like, we know you wrote these books for Julia, where are the books for us? I would show them the summoning and say, this is suitable for ages 11 and up. And they'd be like, there's a girl on the cover. And I'd be like, there's a girl on the cover holding jewelry, and they'd be like, is there kissing in it? Is there? And so they just were not quite into that. So Melissa and I talked about writing books for our sons because she had the same problem, right?
Mm-hmm. Same problem. And we were on the Smart Chicks tour in an airport with Sarah Reese Brennan, who was obsessing over what she called a Calissa book, Kelly Melissa book. And after a couple hours sleep and Sarah being Sarah, it sounded like a really good idea. And it was. I mean, Kelley and I have some traits that seem opposite, but ended up being really complementary. She gets up in the mornings, which I find horrifying, and I stay up at night. So we'd go away together and we'd write on the book 24 hours a day. Like, it was this thing where I had a certain point where I'd hand it over to her, and that was called morning, and I'd go to bed. And then when I'd wake up, it was time to write again. And so we just had this really awesome system. And it also meant that when we did like events and travel and stuff, like, you have a built-in buddy. I mean, like, it was great for the kids, but as a person who, sees my friends rarely because they don't live in the right country or the right state or something like that. It's really nice to have that extra excuse. So it was a lot of fun.
Melissa, you touched on this a little bit, but Marcia wants to know, for everybody else, was there an incident in your life that gave you an idea for one of your series or a scene from one of your books? So Melissa, you touched on it. You have anything else to add there?
Yeah, sure. I mean, Bunny Roo, I wrote in the hospital on my iPhone with a baby in my pouch because he was born addicted to drugs and I had no books with me. And our 10-day stay in the hospital ended up being 41. So I was like downloading classic poetry on my phone and reading it. And so Bunny Roo was entirely about a real event. It was entirely about telling my baby that, I had him, regardless of what symptom. Each of the animals represented a symptom. And so that was that. Ink Exchange, there's a scene in Ink Exchange when Leslie stands on a ledge and considers jumping to deal with or not deal with being raped. And that is the one scene from my life I actually put in a book on purpose. And I guess I didn't expect when I wrote about being a rape survivor that people would know it was real, I think it was Kelley said or Jeaniene said about I don't research killing people by doing it. So why would they assume this was real? But over the years, I've had hundreds of women send me the wings from that tattoo that they got tattooed on their body. And just come up, and it was wonderful. I think I say it often, but if I only had to write one book, that's it. It doesn't talk about being raped, but it talks about being a survivor. And I think, my big fear with writing coming out of teaching is when I was teaching, like, I got to see kids' faces when they understood poetry. Like, I knew I was making a difference in the world. And with books, like, readers don't come to my house and read for some reason. So, like, there's no way for me to know if I'm actually getting anywhere. But with both Ink Exchange, with that, and with Bunny Roo, I hear from readers. I hear from moms, and I hear from, with Bunny Roo and rape survivors with Ink. And that's huge. So, for me, on the days that you talk about, like, not being able to write, that's what I remember. I remember that I got somewhere. So yeah, that.
How about you, Jeaniene? Any real life inspirations?
Actually, the very first book I wrote was, no, it's not a real life inspiration. I wrote it from a dream. So, I don't necessarily think that counts as real life, but it was an inspired. I had a dream about a half vampire woman who was arguing with a full vampire man about why she'd left him years before. And in the dream, I knew she still loved him, but was just convinced that it couldn't work. And I also knew that he had been looking for her the entire time she was gone and was absolutely going to show her that, yes, it could work. And then when I woke up, I just couldn't stop thinking about the characters. And to the point where I thought, well, I'll just write a little bit. And prior to that, I had never completed a book in my life. I wanted to write since age 12, but I'm also lazy and a procrastinator. So I never actually finished a story. And I thought, well, I'll just, I'll just write some of this and some of this and some of this. And that some of it became Halfway to the Grave. And then the book where the fight that started the dream actually doesn't even happen until book 2. So that's how that whole series kicked off, was from answering questions to myself about a dream. And just to circle back to what Melissa said, just real quick, because you were talking about, the neonatal addiction syndrome. Some readers might not know you are not the one who got him addicted to that.
Thank you. Sorry.
So you don't get hate mail.
Yeah. No, I didn't do the drugs. I met him and decided he was mine. That was, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. See, this is why we're friends, because, like, you feel things. Like, Kelley and I on a tour where I started asking about disposing of bodies in the bayou, and I didn't notice the weird looks people were giving me until Kelley speaks up and says, we're writers. So we need friends.
And how about you, Kelley? Any real life things that triggered a scene or an inspiration in a book?
Honestly, if there's anything, it's scenes. It's very, very tiny things. So you might get something with a character. I always joke that there's, my main characters they are definitely not me at all, because that would be very, very boring. But that they all have something in common with me. So yeah, Elena was my age from my part of the world. Chloe from My Darkest Powers. Her surname was my high school name, and she stutters. I stutter, so I could relate that part very well. Olivia from McCainsville likes fast cars and mochas. So, yeah.
Oh, I have something to add. Then if we're talking a real thing from me, Cat's filthy mouth. That is, everyone, they're laughing because they know that is me. And I've had some people say, oh my God, I like your book, but the language in it. And I'm just thinking, honey, never talk to me in person, because I will drop an F-bomb, and every so often it will be in front of children or at church. And it's really embarrassing, but it's just, apparently it just flies out.
And we love you for it. We still love you for it. My very first TLA, my editor stood in the back of the room holding up a piece of paper that says, don't cuss. And I spent the entire panel like trying really hard not to say fuck. And then afterwards, I'm talking to an influential librarian, and I was like, hey, I'm so fucking glad to meet you. And my editor is just like, apparently that is the wrong thing to do. So
Kelley mentioned research. So I know you guys are writing, Kelley, you have kind of I guess even the like straightforward mystery stuff, you still have to do research, but even with kind of the paranormal stuff, I'm sure there's still some research that goes into it. Can you talk a little bit about research process? Let's start with Kelley.
Yeah, I have been so deep in the research trenches lately because I've taken a big leap of faith for an upcoming series. I love reading historical. I'm absolutely terrified of writing it. So I've got a new mystery series starting next year. Vancouver detective ends up in the body of an 1869 Edinburgh housemaid. So having to dive so deeply into the research of not only 1869, but Edinburgh, and early forensics and police work and undertaking. I have a massive stack of primary and secondary sources because I know that I will never get it completely right, but I have to get it as close as I can. But I can say I love that part. I picked a period that I like, city that I like, and all the little extras, whether it's forensics, undertaking, police, that I am interested in, because that makes it so much better. I don't want to be reading primary sources on something that really I'm just not interested in.
Yeah. How about you, Jeaniene? What's your research process like?
Even though I write paranormal, it's set in today's world. There is still a lot of research, and I started writing paranormal set in today's world to avoid research. And I found out you can run, but you can't hide, because even in today's world, if you set something in Savannah, if you don't name the area properly, or you try and make it up or whatever, you get it wrong, you will guaranteed get 10 people from Savannah to tell you what you got wrong. Mm-hmm. So wherever the story is set, research is required. And my vampires can range in age. Some are, only like normal age, and some are some are hundreds of years old, some are thousands of years old. So some of the historical sites, I would do research on to see what would it have been like in this character's day. Because if they happen to walk through the ruins of something, they're probably going to think about what it looked like when it was new. And so what did that look like? And then digging into that research. And I mean, sometimes you can quickly fall down the rabbit hole and do 3 hours of research for what amounts to 2 sentences in the book. And, it can get overwhelming at times. Sometimes it is fun. There are certain things that I really am interested in and find really neat. And other times, if it's a setting I'm not interested in, but I just really need to know the geography to set a scene to make sure I'm not, again, making something up or getting something wrong. Oh my God, I am gritting my teeth and just like, I can't, all this just for 2 friggin' sentences. But yeah, you want to get it right because you want to give the reader your best effort and you want it to be correct. But unlike Kelley, I don't love all of it. I bitch half through it, but you still try and do it because you want to at least show that you got it right. And then without a doubt, I'll probably still get one thing wrong, and someone will be like, "You didn't even spend 5 minutes." It's like, I spent an hour and a half.
And Melissa?
I love research. I mean, I came out of academia. To write Cold Iron Heart, I took a 6-month jewelry making class because my main character, the human character, is a 1800s jeweler. And so I took a class on making jewelry the way Victorians would have, with like no electricity. And I just really immersed in that. I took up historical sword fighting simply because I needed it for a scene. I started with one scene and then I really like the feel of this sword in my hand. With Graveminder, I had an undertaker on call. I would just text random or email random questions or call. I crawled in a grave in Scotland. I mean, I'm very big on the details, but just also how does it feel? What is the sensory part of it? What is this like? So I go overboard. And occasionally, you talk about rabbit hole, I believe I'm a writer because I look for rabbit holes. You say I'm prolific, we say we're prolific, but sometimes I think I think it's because it gives me an excuse to crawl in a grave in Scotland, or to lay on a mortician's table, or to, cut metal with Victorian tools. So I think I write so I can research.
So we've had a couple people ask, so what are you all working on now, and what have you had, either come out recently, or what do you have coming up? Let's start with Melissa.
So Hidden Knife, which is a solo middle grade that I started working on back in 2011, just came out last month. It's a sort of faux Victorian world. The Victorians was my era in graduate school studies. And so it's a Victorian magical world that just came out. I just finished last week or the week before the photography for a book of my photography on wild horses, which is completely fucking terrifying. My photography was a thing that I didn't even admit I did. And then my editor saw it, and suddenly I'm like, people are going to see it and they're going to judge it. And I'm scared. But that's coming next summer. And I have another Wicked Lovely book coming in the spring. And I finished my first graphic novel for DC Comics. And then I finished a script for a collection of comics for them, biographies. I can't talk about the names of either of those, but they're DC and they're awesome. So I got to write comics, which was really cool. So stuff.
How about you, Jeaniene?
Yeah, I don't want to go follow that list. Are you serious? Okay, yeah. Yeah.
I'm trapped at home. It's not my fault.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I'm not doing nearly as much as that. Yeah, I just, of course, finished, not even too long ago, the story in Hex on the Beach. I don't think I finished that until May. Because I write slow, and for the first 6 months out of the year, it was just, I couldn't write at all. I was just kind of, watching way too much news and getting way too horrified by everything. But anyway, so now I'm finally back to writing again. And yes, I'm really, really feel like I'm going to finish the other half of The Grave, which is the retelling of Halfway Through the Grave through Bones' point of view. And I've got free chapters on my website if you haven't already seen it there. And like I said, because I felt really, really comfortable back in that world, and it just was really a lot of fun. And even just writing this latest story, with Cat and Bones and Katie and Denise and all that, it was a lot of fun. So I want to do that. And then after that, I'm probably, unless another character rears their head, because again, I'm an organic writer, and so they will grab the wheel sometimes and take me into a completely different direction. But I mean, Vlad and Layla, I actually have had a lot of ideas about that. And their story, when I last wrote them, people said, you left these things dangling. And I did at the time. And I now, those dangles are starting to really burn up my brain a little bit. So I think they might turn into something.
Awesome. And how about you, Kelley?
Next year I've got 2 series ending and 1 starting. So my Rockton mystery series is ending with book 7. My middle grade fantasy royal guide to monster slaying is ending with book 4, and I'm starting that time travel Edinburgh mystery series. The first one is a rip through time, and we're trying to figure out when exactly it's coming out, but sometime next year for sure.
Awesome.
Okay, so can I just interrupt everyone and say how amazing Kelley's new book is? I am not yet moving into her house to ask for the sequel, but I got to read it, and you guys just need to clear some time when it comes, because phenomenal. Like I like
Is
every
that a sequel to A
So much
Stitch in
fun
Time?
to write, really. No, so Stitch in Time being the sort of romancy, ghosts, haunted houses one, which was my testing ground for, can I be comfortable writing historical, and I love time travel. So let's try that, and then let's go. This was the one that I was aiming for, which was the mystery series with the body swapping one. So yeah.
I also have to throw in Melissa's book, The Hidden Knife. Her recent middle grade is absolutely wonderful too. So if you guys have not picked it up, it's really wonderful as well.
It is. It is.
I keep telling my editor, John, because I'm waiting on revisions. John read the sequel already. John likes the sequel. Can I tell you that John thinks the sequel's better than the first book? And I keep getting back these emails that are like, why is a bookseller reading your book before I do? I'm like, oh, that's a good question. So you are my way of nagging for revision notes. John likes it.
There are not very many authors that I would or could say, oh my God, I just finished this book. Will you please send me your unpublished manuscript? The one that I would even ask, and there's like one that would be like, yeah, here you go. So are you guys planning on potentially doing any more anthologies like this? You know, you said this one kind of summer getaway. Are you thinking like maybe you'll make like, I don't know, like a season out of it and maybe do like 4 of them or something?
So I'm going to say that I'm already watching to see when I can get into Canada to see Kelley, and I've already got Jeaniene scheduled to get out and see her. So, I mean, the anthology was super fun, don't get me wrong, and I love doing things with them, but like I want to hug them. So, you know, right now I'm looking at flights instead of writing.
I'm so excited. We're Matt and I are going to Vermont Saturday. It's his parents' 50th anniversary, so they're getting the whole family together, and it'll be the first time that we've all been together, and we'll be able to hug and be on planes and stuff like that. So yeah, we're definitely excited to get out and about in the world. So I think we are around our time for the evening. So I need to announce our winners for the contest. And Jeaniene, you said you wanted to have them get in touch with you. So what is the best way for them to get in touch with you with their info?
Yes. Yes. If John reads your name and you are a winner, please email me at frostlight1@yahoo.com. And I don't know if you can type in the chat room to write that down, John. It's the email I sent you from, frostlight1@yahoo. And then I will take your information and we will get your prizes to you.
Perfect. So our winners are Ivana Kershey, Anne Chansey, and Marsha Workman. So that was Ivana Kershey, Anne Chansey, and Marsha Workman. So Ivana, you won the $50 Murder by the Book gift card. And Anne and Marsha, you guys each won a copy of Hex on the Beach. So I'm going to post your names in the chat now, so that way you guys know. And I put the email address there. I can't apparently type and talk at the same time. So just to recap, if anybody has joined us late, we have been chatting with Melissa Marr, Kelley Armstrong, and Jeaniene Frost about their new release, Hex on the Beach, which if you order from Murder by the Book, we have signed book plates that are signed by all 3 authors, and we also have bookmarks from them that we'll tuck in there. If you missed any part of the chat and you want to go back and rewatch it once we are done, Facebook and YouTube will archive it. Sometimes YouTube takes just a little bit longer for it, but you'll be able to watch that. If you are new to our Murder by the Book virtual events, while you're on the YouTube channel, search around. There's a lot of great content on there. We did an event with Laurel K. Hamilton, Kim Harrison, Jim Butcher, Patricia Briggs, Charlene Harris. Those are all archived on the YouTube channel and as well as Facebook if anybody wants to check those out. As I mentioned, we are in Houston. So if you guys... you can order from us at murderbooks.com, or you can give us a call, 713-524-8597. While we are primarily a mystery bookstore, we also love our urban fantasy. So if you're looking for urban fantasy recommendations, come visit me. I am the resident urban fantasy reader in the store, and I'm always happy to put books in people's hands. Kelley and Melissa and Jeaniene, this has been so wonderful. I'm sorry we couldn't do this in person, but I'm so happy that we got to do this virtually.
Thank you so much for having us.
Great.
It was great to see you.
Thank you. We need to find a way that we can get to Texas and get hugs from you too.
Yes, definitely. You guys are all welcome. We have a guest room. It's yours anytime you guys want it. Melissa knows that. She's stayed in it a couple of times. It's comfy. She'll tell you. So yeah, you guys are welcome anytime. So everybody have a wonderful evening, and we will talk to you all soon.
Thank you.